Welcome in, peeps. I am so excited today for this episode because not only is Sara Cormany my project manager, she is what I consider beautiful friend and also one of a great prayer warriors for me. She never fails to send me an email. What can I pray for you for? What's going on? Oh, just so good. So I was so excited when her book launched. It is called Even When. And this is a devotional. You have to get this, actually get like a couple of them because you're going to want to keep one and give one to somebody. So I'm going to introduce Sara. Sara Cormany is a wife, mom, and follower of Jesus, a former speech educator and a storyteller at heart. Sara has long had a passion for helping others tell their stories, be it as a teacher, an editor, a writing coach, or a project manager in the publishing industry. She is an award-winning author and speaker whose days are traced by the grace of a good God. And although chronic illness has been part of her life for over 20 years, Sara's journey is proof that a hard story can still be a good story. Sara, her husband, and their 4 children live in Kansas City, Kansas. While she has contributed to multiple compilations and collaborative works, including the award-winning She Writes for Him, Stories of Living Hope, Even When is Sara's first solo title. Oh, Sara, welcome in.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I can say the same about you. I know that writing brought us together, but your heart, just my heart recognized it right away that you would be somebody that would mean the world to me. So thank you.
Aw, okay, it's a love fest.
It is. It is.
I was so excited to get this book in my hands. And I have to say, like, when I started reading through it, I mean, from the very first devotional, which I'm going to read just a snippet of this because I was brought to my knees. Devotion 1 says, even when we want to hold on, he helps us to let go. I'm going to read this little bit because it's so important. My husband's arms carried me up the stairs to my classroom one last time. After he set me down, I steadied my gait and made my way to the chalkboard with hands shaking, heart pounding. It seemed like an impossible ending, walking away from my dream, my students, my classroom, surrendering to an illness no one understood, leaving it all behind, unfinished and undone at barely 26, forcing me to say goodbye to a place that I had learned about love and life, a place where I had seen his goodness poured out, a place where my heart felt at home. I could stay. I should stay. I would stay, I told myself. But then she appeared in the doorway, our tiny, tough as nails building secretary. Without a word, she took my hand. Her eyes saw every bit of weakness, every piece of struggle, and her hands gently led me to a place where we could sit eye to eye. Baby girl, it's time to go. I choked back through my tears, but this is breaking my heart. I know, baby girl, that's why I'm here to help you. Ooh, girl. I read that and, I didn't really know your full story. And I've been just reading through these things and I had no idea the different struggles that you had been through and at such a young age. So can you just go back to that time? So you're 26 years old. Can you tell us what happened?
Absolutely. So it's funny because I kind of mark my life before illness and after illness in the way that I see how God used both of the before and the after to really grow in my heart something that I was not prepared for, that was hard, that was awful, but at the same time did a work in me that I thank God every day for, honestly. But before chronic illness became really just, it's my best friend and my worst friend and the friend I wish would go home sometimes. But I was just one of those women that I achieved, I set a task and I went hard after it. And I really, quite honestly, like I didn't have room to see weakness, or
Mm,
you just put your mind to it and it all worked out all right. And
mm,
that was my faith too. I was fully dependent not on God. I was fully dependent on me, and I thought I was doing a smashing job. And I'm sure I mean, hello.
you were
I was
winning the game.
exactly. I mean, I was in theater. It was like, okay, the show is going well. But in so many ways, I think people would have looked at my life and said, she loves Jesus, she lives for Jesus, but I was really living for myself. And
Mm.
when I turned 24, I started just feeling off. And I grew up in a doctor's house, and I've heard this from other people. Like, it's like, you don't go to the doctor when you have a
Right.
doctor as a parent. It's more like, oh, it'll be fine. We'll check on it
Yeah.
in the morning. Here's a drug sample. Go
Oh
with
my
God.
gosh.
And so I think even just thinking like there's something wrong here was not even in it was not even in my viewpoint until I started dating my husband, and he's like, this isn't normal. What is wrong with you?
Wow.
Like, I think you need to go to the I think you need to go to the doctor. And
Not your
that's what
dad doctor, just
not
a
my
doctor.
dad, like an actual doctor. And that really, they identified that I had really massive fibroid tumors that
Mm.
at the time they weren't sure whether they were fibroids or they were cancerous. And I had an invasive surgery that just set that autoimmune party off in full force. We thought that I would have my surgery and we would get married and we would have this beautiful story of God's faithfulness, but it just wasn't the story that he
Yeah.
was planning to tell. And by the end of my first year of us being married, that's the scene. I was walking away from the
Mm.
classroom, and he was the hands and still is, Phyllis, the hands and feet of Jesus to me every single day.
Mm.
And it's hard
Mm.
looking back on that landscape and know what we didn't have as a newly married couple. But at the same time, gosh, people live a lifetime to find a love like that.
Oh, so sweet. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. So, um, I know that you go through many stories in this book, and each one is just, your mouth just drops. You're like, oh my gosh, this is, and it's so applicable to like a lot of things that we go through too. So it was so relatable on so many levels, especially motherhood and stuff. But so you had a stroke, and
I did.
what age did that happen? And then
I
how did that impact your life?
So before the stroke, my illness was definitely life impacting. Obviously, I had to walk away
Mhm.
from the classroom. There were a lot of things that just felt hard, but I always
Mhm.
got the, oh, you're fine. Like, we don't really know what's going on. Sorry, as you were. I
Mm.
was taking a bunch of
Yeah.
medication, but I didn't really have that diagnosis that we all want sometimes,
Mhm.
just so we know how to solve the problem. And that in and of itself was a lesson of just like, I don't get to know what this is right now. And I don't get
Right.
the easy answer. And
Mm.
then about 4 months after my third baby was born, I was with my best friend. We were in a grocery store, and it's so
Mm.
embarrassing now because I'm like, woman, what was wrong with you? Go to the doctor. I mean, this seems to be the theme of my life. Go to the doctor.
Yeah.
But I mean, that
People
probably
hear this because women
yes.
don't go to the doctor.
No, they don't. And maybe that's what the book should have been called. Just please,
Yeah.
just go to the
Just go to
doctor.
the doctor.
Just go to the doctor. But I started feeling really weird on my left side.
Mm.
My friend was like, "You sound like you're drunk," and I'm like, "Yeah, I don't feel right." And I just went home after it and
Mm.
just thought it was my weird body being weird. Waited 6 weeks to go see my rheumatologist, which, That
Oh
was
my
helpful.
gosh.
But
Yeah.
I said to both he and the little resident, I'm like, I feel really weird and really wonky and really just, I don't know what's going on. And it was pretty clear by the end of it that they knew something was wrong neurologically. And I had an appointment the next morning. And they gave me the clinical diagnosis of stroke. I was in complete denial. Didn't really want to hear the hard news. I wanted to just pretend like I was living in the world I'd been living in, which is it's no big deal. It's fine. You just have a weird body. But to go from we're not really sure what this is to we know what this is and
Mm.
it's serious and it's life threatening. I'd never been there before. And I looked at these three precious babies and it changed the game and it changed the trajectory for the next really 8 to 10 years. I would be in and out of the hospital. I only a few months after I began my therapy, my physical therapy and occupational therapy, we found out I was pregnant again. That I'm embarrassed to say it now that when I first found out, I was just terrified and I cried and I thought, I can't do this. But the reality was, I I knew I wanted the baby, but it wasn't until I started bleeding and we were in the ER and I was just like, please God, pleading with God that,
Mm.
okay, I got it. I got it. The story, again, it always goes back to the story I thought was going to be written and the one that was actually written. And
Mm.
at that time, we got the good news that there was a heartbeat and I could go home and everything was well. And then 4 weeks later, we found out I'd lost the baby. And 5 days
Mm.
after that, I went into septic shock because of an incomplete miscarriage. Woke up
Mm.
on a ventilator in the ICU, and it was a mess of a year. Oh my gosh.
Mm.
But at the same time, it was also a reminder of God's faithfulness because I was still here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I mean, one of those things would have taken most of us out. So having all of that at once, and that's like one of the questions I have when I want to go to heaven is like why he
yeah.
piles on so much on one person, and then it seems like other people don't have that quite of a catastrophic life. And so it's always just a mystery to me, but in the middle of that, that's like the tone of your book is even when. And I love that you keep saying it's not the way I wrote it. It's not supposed to be, right? We write the story, but he's the author of it. And so, he makes these different turns and you're like, "Why are you doing this? What's going on?" But at the end of the day, like he still works it out for his good. And there's still, we have to walk through the pain of that and we have to grieve those things well. We don't want to just, go to the holy right away. So sorry, guys. I'm getting over a respiratory thing, and my voice is like a frog right now. But anyway, so it's hey, even when the
That's
the
right,
show must
sister.
go on. Yeah,
That's
it's
right.
gotta we
Come
just
here
gotta get
now.
through this. So I
Mhm.
feel fine. I just can't talk. So yeah,
Very
it's just
helpful for
funny
a
because
podcast, right?
right?
Very
I
helpful.
mean,
Mhm,
this is God's
mhm.
plans. He's like, no, we're gonna make you sound like a frog today. So deal with it. But yeah, it's just so funny because I look back at like really hard stories of in my own life too, of where you just think like, there's no way I can survive this, especially the death of a child. Like you and I have that in common, and you're just like, man, I don't think I can get up from this. Like, this is crazy. But then you're adding all these different things too, like septic shock, you've had a stroke, you have an immune disease, like so many things. And it isn't the story that we would write. But in the midst of that, like what I hear is he brought you this beautiful man that here on earth that can love you well
Mhm.
and has never walked away from you, and that, is there in the trenches with you. You have these beautiful children, that stay with you. And so, our stories really are not our own without
Mhm.
God being like the true author in it. And so I think that that's why it's so appropriate for this devotional. You are such a hope for people because you have walked through some big trenches and come out the other side saying, like, it's not over. There's still more. There's still things that happen. But, God walks beside us through all of it. So I want to know, like, of all the stories of faith in this book, like, which one stands out to you the most?
Oh, glory. Well, I could talk about the one where I mooned the world, but I will save that.
Yeah.
I
Make them
think
buy that.
make them buy it to read about me. And it actually has happened more than once, believe it or not, but just once in the book. So I think, one of the things that I appreciate just about your podcast and your heart is this idea that we as moms, we're not perfect, but we're failing forward and we're always trying to do better and heal from our past and heal from our mistakes and
Mhm.
move forward in that. And I think that is one of the things that connects me to you so deeply, even though our stories are different, our past there have been different. There is such, gosh, I love that about you and I love that about your heart. But there is a story in there, and it took me 3 years to admit I needed to use a cane. And this took
Yes.
a lot of falling, a lot of really embarrassing situations. But when you're a stubborn girl and you're a mom we need 80 million hands anyways, right? We need
Yeah.
so you want to take one of my hands that's going to go on a cane and I have 3 children. Now,
Yeah.
how does that make sense?
How in the
But
world?
how in the world? So the very first day that I was going to go solo into a public, and this was probably not the best testing of everything. The setting for my first venture out with my cane was just, I mean, it was perfect. It was a perfect storm. Here I was. I was by myself and 3 children, probably about 6 and under,
Oh my gosh.
going to the Christmas choir rehearsal at church, so precious, so lovely. We show up and and the room is filled with adults only. And my oldest turns to me and she's like, Mom, I told you
Mhm.
we were late. And in fact, we were only 10 minutes of rehearsal late,
Oh
but
my
it was
gosh.
enough time for my son, who climbed everything at that point. He was like Spider-Man, thought he was Spider-Man, and was literally climbing the walls. My 2-year-old, who is I mean, she still is very dramatic, but especially as a toddler, was throwing herself on the floor, screaming and crying. And all I could do there was watch, trying to like manage my cane. And then I just sort of looked around and I was just like, okay, you know what? Lord, please just let Grace come back quickly because there is no redeeming this situation at all. She shows up and I'm like, all right, let's go. Well, I see the elevator right in front of me. And I'm like, okay, it was like, manna from heaven. And all I had to do was just get to the elevator
Just get to the
and
elevator.
just get to the elevator. And Drew is kicking the bottom of my cane. And I'm just like falling. And the child who's screaming is falling. And all of a sudden I hear this like laughter behind me. And I'm like, what? And so I turn around and it's one of my MOPS friends from like when Grace
Mhm.
was a baby. And she's like, Sarah, I am so sorry to laugh, but this is literally the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And I was like, I know.
I
Could
know.
you
And
like,
it's my
could you,
life.
I know, right, exactly. And I was like, could you like call my physical therapist and
Oh my
explain like
gosh.
this is an assistive device. It is not
Yeah.
assisting. And at that point, then my daughter fell to the floor and I almost toppled over her. And I get home and I'm eating chocolate and I'm just thinking that was, thank goodness that's over. But oh, my stars, what a mess. And I get this message from another young mom who says, I saw everything tonight and I just want you to
Mm.
know seeing you in your messiness made me not feel so alone in mine.
Mm.
And as much as it sucked
Yeah.
that I finally had to do something that demonstrated to the world that I was weak, that I was a mess. Like anytime somebody sees me, my cane was this like new testimony that
Yeah.
communicated to anyone around me, you know what, I'm not perfect, I'm
Yeah.
weak, but it gave them the ability to say me too. And I
Yeah.
think that's who we're supposed to be, not only as moms, not only as followers of Jesus, but just as people who are imperfect, saying, I'm not perfect either, but God can still use me. And
Oh
he
my
can still
gosh.
write stories through my imperfection that are going to reach through the pain of another and say, you're not alone. And gosh, isn't that the best? No matter the
That's so
pain that you
beautiful.
go through,
Yeah.
and it doesn't remove the fact that it stinks, and it doesn't remove the
Totally.
fact that it's awful and that you want to eat an entire bag of chocolate and just cry yourself a river, and you need to
Yeah.
do that too.
Yeah.
But it does give you this platform that you wouldn't have otherwise if you're trying to hide it and mask it. And
Right.
I was the queen. I was the masking queen because my illness was invisible. And
Yeah.
I would only drop that mask if I thought I should. And a lot of times I probably should, but that cane did it for me. And it really, I think, opened the door to a whole different way to look at life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And what a it's so it's such a just a diverse like look at there's moms that have hands and feet that actually are stumbling. And
Yeah.
then here you are saying, I am stumbling, literally. And, you want
Let's
to look,
stumble together. Let's
it's like,
stumble
listen,
together.
yeah, that girl was like, you gave her a gift because she's like, that's how I feel every day, but I can walk with two hands and got my two, or walk with my 2 feet and I have my two hands and I still can't do it. Cause you're describing that. And I'm like, that's my daughter's life right now with 3 kids. And she's a busy mom and all the stuff. And it's like, she's like, this is a lot. Like, this is, she goes, my house can't look clean at this point in our life. She has 3 kids under 6. Like, it's
Yep.
impossible. There's toys everywhere. There's clothes everywhere. She picks up every day and then it's like 5 minutes later, a bomb went off again because that's your life right now. And it needs to be okay. And I think in this social media, Instagram picture world, yes, of course, we're going to show the pretty pictures and stuff too, but can we just always talk about the mess? Because we're all stumbling and falling. We all have different things that are getting stuck in our way or that we're not doing the way we think it's supposed to be, the story that we think we're supposed to have in our head. It's not that way. So I had a question. Your children, I was curious about how they handled your illness growing up. Were they frustrated? Was there compassion? Did they feel resentment? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
I think yes, yes, and yes, like all of
Yeah.
the above.
Yeah.
And I think the gift of this book now is
Mm-hmm.
we are seeing across the landscape of our lives as a family. I think the other thing we have to admit as moms is that we fail. We mess
Mm-hmm.
up. We do things that have long-term consequences. And sometimes they're not even our fault. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
life brings circumstances that we just didn't know how to
Yeah.
handle or feel equipped to handle. And I just, for the mom listening, I want to say there is redemption there. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
first thing that I will say.
Mm-hmm.
But in in every way, I have seen my children become more compassionate because they
Mm-hmm.
have a mom who they had to help.
Right.
I have my fiercely independent dramatic girl. She was my baby that had to learn how to crawl into bed, or we had to booty scoot
Mm.
down the stairs
Oh,
because
you can't
just,
hold
it was,
her. Yeah.
yeah, just
Yeah.
ridiculous. But it has inside of her placed a fierce independence, and she
Mm.
is in every way an advocate for the person who is being picked on. And
Wow.
sometimes we're like, okay, sister, you might want to dial that back. But
Yeah.
it is, that's where,
So
she does still need a
cute.
mom every so once in a while. But it has built in her this grit that
Mm.
would not have been formed in any other way. And
Mm.
my son, the same thing,
Oh.
he he is a tender soul. And he is a tender soul that always sees me even when I mask. He'll show up and go, "Are you
Mm.
okay? Can I
Oh.
help you?" And I'm like, how beautiful. And my daughter, who is getting ready to graduate, and I'm not dealing with it very well,
Oh.
she is somebody that she was the one that took the brunt because she was the
Mm.
oldest.
Mhm.
And anybody who is the oldest, we take that, we have to fix it. We have to step
Mhm.
in and fix it. But I
Mhm.
have watched her courageously face the reality of a mom that we don't even, I don't think, have realized the full emotional impact of being in elementary school and going off for her day and worrying, is my mom going to be home? Is she going to be in the
Yeah.
hospital? Is she going to
Yeah.
be here? And
Wow.
gosh, Phyllis, gosh, that kills me as a mom, not knowing the full impact it had on her.
Mhm.
But watching her courageously face that hurt and that
Mhm.
pain and
Mhm.
overcoming it, not because of me, but in spite of me, there is nothing more brave. And
Yeah.
there is nothing more beautiful than looking at the landscape of these years and even the challenges and knowing 10 years ago, I prayed for these days. 10
Yeah.
years ago, I thought I wasn't going to be here to see
Yeah.
this. But even the hard stuff, even the medical trauma, the trauma on a family when you have chronic illness, that has even been a process that I've been privileged to be a part of, even though it's been hard. So
Oh my
I hope, did
gosh.
that answer your question?
That's beautiful. And I'm like so excited for your kids to grow up and knowing that they have this compassionate heart of knowing the hard already at these ages and learning how to maneuver through all of that and also grieving parts of them that didn't get to experience like a whole different kind of situation, but being so proud of their mom that their mom is still here fighting the good fight and being a loving mom and just laughing through it and crying through it and eating lots of chocolate.
Amen.
Oh my
Amen.
gosh.
Amen.
So for a final question is just like, what kind of words would you give somebody going through a really hard time right now?
So many, but we don't have time for so many. So I think the biggest thing that we, as whether you're following Jesus or you're just curious about faith, Jesus is point blank it. He
Yes.
is the only reason that I have made it through the really hard places in my life. And
Mm.
I don't say that to give lip service or to be trite, because I think sometimes we do the whole Christianese, everything
Yeah,
happens for a reason. Well, sometimes those reasons really suck. Okay? They
exactly.
do.
Just
They
putting it
just do.
out there.
Just laying it out there. So
Yeah.
I I think that when we are hard things that leave us bruised and bloodied and
Mhm.
broken, and not even just looking over the cliff, but
Mhm.
falling deep into the pit, and
Mhm.
having to face the worst moments of our lives, knowing that there is a God who not only is good, but that he
Mhm.
sees every point of pain. And when
Yeah.
people fail you, when the world fails you, he won't. And
Mm.
I think that's the thing I would say the most. And that's what Even When really is about is
Mhm.
God is good. And it's not God is good. Okay, so
Mm.
let's just move on. It's God
Yeah.
is good
Good. Yeah.
in the middle of
Yeah.
every circumstance. And life is hard. We
Mm.
don't get easy. We don't get light.
No.
Life is hard. And he's
Mm.
the best person I've found to be with me for the journey. So
So
I hope
beautiful.
that
I love
answered
that.
your question.
That
Oh, you're so
totally
sweet.
answered my question, girl.
You're so
No, I
sweet.
love that. It's he is with us in the deep pit, and he doesn't like rush us out. And I think that's when people think that it needs to be rushed out, they're missing the point. Is that sometimes you need to just sit there for a little bit, and so that he can like hold you and show you the lesson and show you the things that are happening, and let that is what faith is, because it's like if everything was beautiful
Yeah.
and we got everything we wanted because we're good Christians, we wouldn't need him. And
Yep.
so I think in the pit is when we really need him, and he shows up and he
Yeah.
will comfort. And so um, this book is available on Amazon now, right? All ready
Yes,
to
it
go.
is. It
Totally.
is
Yep.
ready to go. Yep.
And
Yep.
how can people find you the easiest way?
Well, you can go to my website at www. That sounds so funny. I'm sorry.
www.
www.saracormany.com. Yes, you can you can connect with me there or on social media, Facebook,
Okay.
Instagram, and just so that you know, like people are my I love people. So any way that I can connect with you, send me a private message. Let me know if there's something I can pray for, because I think when God has given you the grace of a rewritten life,
Mm-hmm.
that you want others to know that they're not alone. And so, in any
That's
way,
awesome.
if you're able to connect, my gift to you is the book, but I would love to
Yes.
connect with you other
And she
places
will
as well.
too. I will say
Yeah.
she follows through. She says what she means, and that's why I love Sarah. So thank you so much for today, peeps. We will keep you posted. Just leave a comment if you have something. Again, look Sarah up if you want to DM her. Ask her a question. If you have something that you want to talk to her about, she is open to do that. And until next time, I'll see you later, peeps.